Good afternoon, and welcome to Community Matters. This is your host, Becky Steinbruner, for our program today, and I will invite you, the public, to call and join the conversation. Today I have no guest live in the studio or on the line, so that makes you the potential guest to call in today anytime during the program. The number is 265-5050. Again, 265-5050. And you can be the guest today, one of many, I hope, on Community Matters. The purpose of my program here on Santa Cruz Voice is to inform and involve the local community and beyond in local matters. Because we're in the heat of the election season, I have been focusing on local election measures and candidates, and we'll be reviewing and looking at some of those today. And there is a possibility that someone may call in regarding Measure M, as in Mary. That's the Pajaro Valley Unified School Bond measure, asking the voters within that school district, if we want to go into debt for a $315 million bond. That would be 30 years of debt when there are already 3 other bond measures on our property taxes. So we may have Dr. Contreras calling in. I'm not sure. She didn't respond to an invitation, but if not today, maybe next week. So I wanted to do a bit of a commercial here because I always get busy in the program and forget to do it, but I really want to thank the Satellite Work and Digital Media Center for helping Santa Cruz Voice find such a good home. We are in the complex of Satellite Work and Digital Media Center. That's at 325 SoCal Avenue. It's between Ocean Street and the San Lorenzo River. It is a wonderful place. If you need a place to just have a little meeting or a quiet time to do some work, you should come check this place out. It's quiet, it's clean, it's very secure, and a really good place and very reasonable rates. The first Friday of every month you can come in and try it out for free. So put that on your calendar and do come check out the wonderful facilities at Satellite Work and Digital Media Center. Santa Cruz Voice shares this complex with Community Television, another very fine organization. So, happy Friday, the last Friday program of October, and I just want to do a bit of a recap. Last Friday, we had the honor of having Scotts Valley Fire Chief Mark Carrera with us. He came to the studio and with my invitation to talk for 1 hour about Measure S, the bond measure, $24.5 million bond measure that Scotts Valley Fire District is putting to its voter. And because we had a great conversation about that. Because Chief Carrera sits on the Santa Cruz County Fire Chiefs Association, I asked him to talk about Measure Q, which is on your ballot. It is on the ballot county-wide to put an $87 tax on every parcel except those exempt, and I think those exempt parcels will be those parcels owned by the Land Trust of Santa Cruz County, who has paid to put this on the ballot. But it would put $87 per parcel forever on all parcels in the county of Santa Cruz for the purpose of many things, many vague things. And the issue of oversight is a big question. If you hopefully you will read about this. The Santa Cruz Sentinel had a really good op-ed piece on Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024, No on Overly Broad County Measure Q. Our discussion last Friday with Fire Chief Carrera really highlighted a lot of the problems that have with Measure Q that compelled the Santa Cruz County Fire Chiefs Association to make an unprecedented move to file the argument against Measure Q. That has never happened, but it did happen, and with very good reason. And just recapping a bit from our discussion here last Friday in the second hour with Chief Carrera, primarily it's because the fire chiefs are sick and tired of being used, as they are in Measure Q, to sell a tax to the voters, preying upon their concern for fire and support of the fire and emergency responders. When afterwards, none of the money gets sent or shared with the fire and emergency responders. We have seen that happen in 2018 with Measure G. We saw it in 2022 with Measure B that increased the transient occupancy sales tax, transient occupancy tax that all hotels and motels have to pay. Airbnbs are supposed to pay. That went up a lot. And again, the county used that the slogan that it would help fund fire and emergency response and roads. Don't forget that one. That's always a good seller. And yet zero of Measure B money has gone to any fire mitigation projects. Zero has gone to fund any fire agencies doing that very important work in our county. So we saw it again with Measure K. In March of this year, county went to the voters and asked us to pass an increase, a half-cent sales tax increase in the unincorporated area. But amazingly, they let those voters in the cities also vote on it, even though the half-cent sales tax only affected the unincorporated area. Now, isn't that amazing? Well, none of that money has gone to fund fire either. So that's why the Santa Cruz Fire Chiefs Association wrote opposition to Measure Q. I urge you, if you haven't voted already, to really think hard and long and vote no on Measure Q and stand in solidarity with the Fire Chiefs Association. Enough is enough of the county using them and never coming through with what they have promised the voters they would do. Now, I mentioned Measure K a little bit. In the Santa Cruz Sentinel, October 1st of 2024, on the bottom fold of the front page, it talks about the Measure K lawsuit resolved. And I really want to give great thanks to Mr. Bruce Holloway, who is truly a good citizen and active participant in our local community, who filed a lawsuit against the county for allowing city voters to vote on something that did not affect them. And it was taken to court and settled out of court. But in this article, it talks about the Measure K, which did pass. Of course it would. They said it's going to help the fire people and fix the roads. Well, Measure K funds were held in limbo because of Mr. Holloway's lawsuit. And again, I want to thank Bruce Holloway many times over for his action. So $7.5 million is expected to be added to the revenue this year now that the settlement has happened. One of the good things that came out of this settlement is that the county must now account for the monies they collected with Measure G in 2018, where they said they would fund fire and road, and Measure K that was just passed in March of 2024, to really make it transparent what money is coming in and how are they spending it. Show us you're spending it on roads. Show us you're spending it on fire. That will be very interesting to see, especially with Measure G, because the fire agencies have seen zero of the money, sales tax money increase from Measure G. There was a Santa Cruz County grand jury investigation of the county's action of Measure G in 2018. And it was determined that, yes, it was deceptive. And one of the recommendations, because the grand jury's purpose is really to identify problems and present solutions to make improvements, one of the recommendations for improvements was that the county would separate out the Measure G sales tax monies and to show how it is being spent. And the county's response was, no, we're not going to do that because it's too hard. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Bruce Holloway, for taking the legal action, because now part of the settlement is that the county will have to do that. We'll see if they do it. There's always that piece, isn't there? They can say what they want, but do what they want. And so it's up to you and me, people, to be the fourth arm of active government and see to it that they do. So I would like to move to Measure R. First of all, if you haven't been reading your ballot books and pamphlets, both state and local, please do that. Read through them carefully before you vote. Don't go on the glossy mailers that we're all receiving with a lot of expense, because that's just salesmanship. And let me just back up. I've pulled out of my stack of materials here regarding Measure Q. One that I received, my household received, from the Yes on Q folks who have lots and lots of money. Remember, it is put on the ballot by the Land Trust of Santa Cruz County. They paid to get the signatures to qualify it, to put it there. And they're calling themselves a citizen so that they can, under an upland court case decision, get their $87 per parcel forever tax measure approved with a 50% plus one threshold. That's due to it's known as the upland case. Bad court decision that is under legal challenge, but that's what we have right now. And the Land Trust and the county pounced on it. So here it is on our ballot. And they sent out this very glossy, large, full-color ad that focuses on fire protection. On the front, it says, before there's smoke, and it looks like some little dead animal burning on the front. It's disgusting. Vote yes on Q and help prevent wildfire. That is disgusting. Because let me tell you, the Fire Chiefs Association went to the Land Trust leaders and said, look, if you're going to make these claims, if you're going to use fire to sell your tax measure, carve out a piece to ensure that the fire agencies and fire risk reduction projects will get a piece. And the Land Trust said, no, we don't have any appetite for doing that. And the fire chiefs went back and said, okay, if you're not going to do that much, take off this whole piece of wildfire because it's deceitful. The Land Trust said, no, we don't have any appetite for doing that. And that was, again, what compelled the Fire Chiefs Association to come out in opposition They filed the argument against Measure Q. That is unprecedented. I can't tell you how much we all need to stand up and pay attention to that. And so here is the Yes on Q sending out the whole glossy thing, preying upon people's concern for wildfire, and promising that Measure Q will help fix it. That's disgusting, it's deceitful, and again I say vote no on Measure Q and stand in solidarity with your Fire Chiefs Association. Now, the interesting thing, and this is going to segue into a discussion of opposition of Measure R, Central Fire. The Fire Chiefs Association oppose Measure Q. Signed on the letter of opposition is Central Fire Chief Association, Central Fire Chief Jason Nee. He's against Measure Q. What the Measure Q people did is they went to Central Fire firefighters, their union, and said, look, if you support Measure Q, we'll support your Measure R, and you'll have a better chance. You'll have money to do some signage and expensive mailers for Measure R. So they did, sadly. The Firefighters Local Union 3535 endorsed Measure Q. And right away, the Land Trust Measure Q people put that out in bold announcements on the website, to their supporters, anybody on their mailing list, that the Firefighters Local Union 3535 supports Measure Q. Well, how bad does that look to the public when the Firefighters Union goes against their own chief? You really have to question the integrity of the Firefighters Local 3535 leadership. I did have a conversation with Rolf Lingen, the shop steward, and asked him to please remove the endorsement. He shook his head and looked down. He said that will never happen. And why? Because they got a big bunch of money from the Land Trust. Now that's local politics, but in my opinion gives people more reason to vote no on Measure Q. So let's move into Measure R. I had the honor of having Central Fire Chief Jason Nee and Assistant Fire Chief Anthony Cefaloni here in the studio a couple of weeks ago and talking about Measure R. And it was a great program. I really appreciated them coming into the studio and answering questions. Afterwards, I did receive a few questions from you, the audience, regarding Measure R. And so I sent those questions to Chief Nee, and right away he responded with the answers. I'll summarize them a bit because he went into a lot of detail on a couple of questions. One question that a listener wrote was, why didn't Central Fire go for a bond earlier when interest rates were lower? And Chief Nee's answer was that they tried to acquire and develop properties without going to the public for a tax increase. However, over the past few years, the cost of land and developing that land has risen at a faster pace than the district can keep up with. We certainly have seen that, haven't we? As to timing, Central Fire completed consolidation with Aptos La Selva and Central Fire in 2021. Before the completion of consolidation, most of the focus was on the consolidation efforts. This effort was a very heavy lift for both organizations. There was a lot of, this is my interjection, there was a lot of unbalance, let's say, between wages and benefits and things between Central Fire and the old Central Fire and Aptos La Selva. And it actually took a piece of legislation, one of those amazing gut and amend efforts that legislators can do, where they've got something ready to go, has gone through committee, and they completely hit the erase button and put in what they want, and then it continues on its merry way to the governor without a completely different effort, but having supposedly gone through all the committees. So it's called gut and amend. It's supposed to be for emergencies, but it gets used way too much for non-emergencies, and that's what it took to complete the consolidation of the old Central Fire and Aptos La Selva Fire to become Central Fire Protection District of Santa Cruz County, the new animal, and a big animal at that. So going back to Chief Nee's answer, it was a very heavy lift for both organizations. After consolidation, we set out to determine what the organization's strengths and weaknesses were via the master plan. We received the master plan in 2022, and that outlined areas we need to make significant improvements. Then we began developing the financial plan and hired a municipal advisor to help provide the potential avenues for generating revenue. That was completed at the end of 2023, and once that was established, that what the needs were, what the funding opportunities are, we began to prepare for the next opportunity for bringing the question to the public. November of 2024 was the next voting opportunity, and it was a good time to bring it to the public. There are significant costs associated with holding a vote. The County Elections Office estimates $2.50 to $4 per voter to run an election. Our district has approximately 35,000 voters. So to run an election costs the district $90,000 to $140,000. So we wanted to make sure we could be comfortable with the ask, and the process had been thoroughly considered before taking it to the voters. So that was the answer to one question. Why did you do it now? And why did you do it at all? The second question a listener wrote in was, would the $29 per parcel fee that has to be charged for 30 years to repay this $221 million bond that Central Fire wants to go for, would that it's $29 per $100 assessed property value, assessed value on your taxes. And this listener wrote in, would it be assessed on the land and the improvements? So on your tax bill, you get assessed. There's an evaluation for the land and evaluation for the improvements, your house, whatever, ADU. It would be, would the $29 be for the whole thing? And here is Chief Nee's answer. The $29 per $100,000 assessed value is based on assessed value of a parcel that the County of Santa Cruz has on record. If there are improvements to the parcel that denote an assessment from, then yes, that will be part of the assessed value. The $29 per $100,000 is not based on the market value, which is often quite a bit higher than the assessed value. But think about not only residential parcels, but also commercial parcels, which often have a very high tax value. And then one final question that an audience member wrote in was, part of this $221 million bond would be spent building a training center. Where would it be built? And Chief Nee answers, they don't know yet, but they're looking for a place because the firefighters need to have a good training center that is relatively close to their response areas. Currently, Santa Cruz County has 2 training centers, one in Bonnie Doon and one in Watsonville. Both locations are 45 minutes from the district. Every time we send equipment and personnel to those training sites, we are not covering that respective geographic location. where the fire engine would normally be located. For example, if the Live Oak, that's the 17th Avenue station, goes to a training in Watsonville for 2 hours, the area that they would normally respond to lacks a fire resource for 3.5 hours due to travel times, and that puts the public at risk and drives up response time. And he just ends with, in a business where seconds matter, that is problematic. And again states they're not sure where. So thank you to Central Fire Protection District of Santa Cruz County Chief Jason Nee for answering those questions. And after that was subsequent to his interview with partner with Chief Cefaloni a couple of weeks ago. So I've also been, I'm not in Central Fire District's area, but they do respond because they are the closest responding agency to my home, and they do a good job. But again, the cost is the thing. And here I will tell you that all of these bond measures for firefighters, for fire stations, are counting that Prop 5 that State Proposition 5 will pass. And if you have not looked at that issue, look at that one very, very carefully. Because what it would do, it says it would lower the voting approval threshold for bond measures regarding affordable housing and infrastructure. Well, infrastructure would encompass the fire agencies and hospitals, many other things. School bonds already get passed at 55% approval rating. If Prop 5 passes, the state Prop 5, then that would allow any other bond measure on the ballot on November 5th to also be able to pass at 55% level. Right now it's 2/3. So that's an interesting thing, isn't it? That if depending on the outcome of a state proposition, it can greatly affect many, many local ballot bond measures. They could be approved with a 55% when usually under Prop 13 they would require a 2/3. Now there is opposition. Last week's guest, Chief Mark Carrera from Scotts Valley, their bond measure S, had no written opposition. Chief Central Fire's bond measure R did have opposition filed, and that was filed by a group of citizens, some of whom I know, and they are very concerned that our property taxes, with these special assessments adding on, are going to reach the point, they almost are now, of the point that people on fixed incomes, seniors, disabled, veterans, who get no exemptions, that these people will not be able to make ends meet. It's already difficult with the inflation. If you are one of those folks, why don't you call in and let's talk about that. 265-5050. That's in the 831 area code, 265-5050. Because it's an issue, it's an issue that is cumulative, isn't it? You look today at voting on something that they say, it's only the cost of a latte every day. Well, you add all of those issues up that is only the cost of a latte a day, and pretty soon you're drinking so many lattes that you're strangling. And here we are adding already, this county is the most expensive place to live in the nation. and we're looking at adding hundreds of dollars more on people's property taxes. And there may be a time when they just cannot pay them. And then what do we do? Well, those people would have to move out, wouldn't they? And I know someone who, during the Great Depression, her family had to leave their long-standing farm because they couldn't pay the property taxes. So it's a very serious matter, and we're really, I think, at the tipping point of being there in Santa Cruz County. So vote carefully, vote with thought, and read thoroughly all of the ballot measure materials. I would really like to thank the opposition to Measure R. Carmen Bernal is really a trooper. She's very shy. Maybe she's listening. Maybe she'll call in. But she's very shy. She didn't want to come on the program. She doesn't like to interview. She doesn't like being very public. But she's right up there in my book with Bruce Holloway because she very quietly goes about educating people, arranging forums. In the past, I've worked with her on other bond issues, and she spent a lot of her own money copying information and paying someone to help her go out. She's a senior citizen and retired and on a fixed income. And she went out with this helper and went door to door, talking with people, leaving flyers. Now that's a citizen for you to really model. Somebody out of their own heart, their own limited, very limited resources, goes out and tries to help people understand what's really happening. Carmen Bernal is a real hero in my book, right there with Bruce Holloway, and a lot of other people. But the problem that Carmen Bernal had with the Measure R is that it is by law supposed to include the duration of the bond, and it didn't. And I was at the fire board meeting when they were considering whether to put this Measure R on the ballot, going to ask the voters for a $221 million bond debt. And she asked that question, don't by law you have to put that duration on? And the consultant kind of waved her aside, just dismissed it all. And I thought that was really wrong. The board didn't seem to clue in to that being important, and they just went ahead and rubber stamped it. So she filed opposition, and you really have to think about what your vote would do, and don't ever dismiss the importance of your vote, because there have been issues such as Fire Chief Carrera's discussion last week saying that Scotts Valley Fire had already asked the voters last year to fund a bond to build a new fire station in Scotts Valley, and it lost by 12 votes. So don't ever think that it doesn't really matter how you vote, because it does. And don't ever think that it doesn't matter whether or not you vote, because it really does. So I just wanted to put that out in for you to think about, and to thank Carmen for her good work and the work of all of those who are out there talking with their neighbors, taking, it's almost become something of an act of bravery to discuss politics with people. But I encourage you to call in here to Community Matters, area code 831-265-5050, and let me know what's on your mind, and we can talk about local politics or other things. So I mentioned a little bit about State Proposition 5 and how important that is. That is on the ballot, State Proposition 5. I'm reading here from the Howard Jarvis Tax Association newsletter. Back in 2000, California voters were persuaded to change the Constitution to allow school bonds to pass with just 55% voter approval instead of two-thirds. That's 66.7%. Many more bonds were approved under this lower standard, as any homeowner can see on their property tax bill. Charges for bond debt are listed in the section labeled Voted Indebtedness, or something like that. Proposition 5 would lower the standard for approving local bonds to 55% for almost everything. Now, I think it's a little sneaky that it's been labeled primarily for affordable housing, which it's on the forefront of everyone's mind. It's expensive to find a place to live in California. Going back to the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association newsletter. However, Measure Prop 5 applies to infrastructure, which is broadly defined, and also to affordable housing, again defined so broadly that it even includes cash assistance. Cash assistance. Let me turn the page here. For down payments. An earlier version of ACA, that's a change to Constitution 1, also lowered the vote threshold for passing special taxes, such as parcel taxes and sales taxes, but lawmakers scrambled at the last minute to take out the provisions applying to special taxes after polling indicated that voters would say no. Voters should say no anyway. Bonds are debt, and debt is repaid with tax increases. The only difference between the old version of ACA 1 and the new one that is now on the easier tax increases are exclusively property tax hikes. Everyone still pays them, regardless of whether they are homeowners or renters. Higher property taxes on an apartment building or other rental property are eventually passed through to tenants as higher rent, and higher property taxes on business property are passed through as higher consumer prices. By making it easier to raise property taxes, Proposition 5 will raise the cost of living even higher in California. Let me say that again, and think about that. Proposition 5 will raise the cost of living even higher in California, which has already the highest poverty rate in the nation when the cost of living is taken into account. Deceptively, proponents of Prop 5 claim that it is not a tax increase. In fact, it's something worse. It's an engine for more and more tax increases, enabling more bond debt to be proposed and approved in every election, in every city, county, and special district, like fire districts, Measure S, Measure R. The resulting property tax increases get around the limits of Proposition 13, so property tax bills will rise, and many California homeowners could soon be at risk of losing their homes. The framers of California's government were well aware of the risk of excessive debt. The 1849 California Constitution, a handwritten document now in the state's archives, warns in Article 4, Section 37, quote, "It shall be the duty of the legislature to provide for the organization of cities and incorporated villages, and to restrict their power of taxation, assessment, borrowing money, contracting debts, and loaning their credit, so as to prevent abuses in assessments and in contracting debts by such municipal corporations." End quote. California's 1879 Constitution formalized this directive. Article 11, Section 18 states, quote, "No county, city, town, township, Board of Education, or school district shall incur any indebtedness or liability in any manner or for any purpose exceeding in any year the income and revenue provided for it for such year, without the assent of 2/3 of the qualified electors thereof." End quote. 2/3. But today's state legislature wants to throw that protection and empower the cities, counties, and special districts to incur indebtedness with the approval of only 55% of the voters. Proposition 5 would override the thoughtful and long-standing protection in the current Constitution. It is a constitutional amendment requiring only a simple majority, 50% plus 1, to pass. Proposition 5 is a costly, dangerous proposal that will lead to an exponential increase in local government debt that must be repaid by property owners and without regard to the ability to pay. Please tell your friends and neighbors how important it is to watch the mail for the ballots in early October and to vote no on Measure 5, Proposition 5. So again, that's from a newsletter from the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association called the Taxing Times, and that was in the fall of this year, talking about that. So think about that. Vote no on Prop 5 if you can, and tell your friends, talk with your friends about this. We are coming into near the end of our second hour, and I want to thank you all for listening to Community Matters. I'm Becky Steinbruner, your host, and hoping you will call in and join me in talking about some of these issues and what you're thinking about them. The number to call is 831-265-5050. Now, I would also urge you to listen to my former co-host Jeff Bosshard's program. He has his own program now. It's called Freedom Forum, very appropriately. It's Mondays at 1 o'clock, and I urge you to listen to those programs too. Next Monday, Jeff will be discussing many of these same issues, but he's a retired attorney and well-versed in law, well-versed in the Constitution and politics as well. He himself has run for political offices throughout the years and is truly a wonderful citizen. So listen to Jeff Bosshard's program, Freedom Forum, Mondays, 1 o'clock. And he'll be talking about a lot of these issues that will involve us all. And I especially urge you to listen because he'll be discussing Measure M on the Santa Cruz ballot if you live within the Pajaro Valley Unified School District area. That's a very large district, and they have a bond measure. Also, I think this will be the third one on the ballot. And if it passes, it will be the third on our property tax. I'll be talking about that a little more in our second hour, but I urge you to listen to Jeff Bosshard's Freedom Forum program. I'll go ahead and get started talking about Measure M. I had invited the president of the Pajaro Valley School Board of Trustees, Miss Georgia Acosta, whom I respect very much, to join me here. And I hadn't heard from her. She phoned me this morning and said that she could not because she teaches up at UCSC on Fridays, and she encouraged me to contact the Pajaro Valley District Superintendent, Dr. Heather Contreras. So I tried phoning. It went to her secretary, and I could only leave a message, and I sent an email, and I checked just before I came here. She has not responded. So I'm hoping to get Dr. Heather Contreras on with us next Friday, but I left with her the idea that she could call in today for any amount of time and just talk about Measure M, M as in Mary. So hopefully she will, either today or next Friday. I am one of the filers in opposition of Measure M, and here's why. I echo Carmen Bernal's concern, as well as the signers who also signed opposition for Measure R, Measure M, and a lot of other measures, bond measures, because we're at the point here, as I said earlier, the tipping point, and as the Howard Jarvis newsletter discusses, if we keep passing these debts upon ourselves, it can get to the point that no one, or a select few, can afford them. And I think we all have to live within our means, and these agencies also need to operate within their means. Now, Measure M would be a $315 million bond for 30 years. And what I find offensive about it is that it's very, very vague, very broad. And I think it's also being sold rather deceptively. The Pajaronian, the newspaper for the Watsonville-Pajaro Valley area, had an article and a photo showing the Pajaro Valley High School kids sitting on the floor in a cramped space, and gee, wouldn't it be nice if they could get a theater performing arts building, which is on the master plan for that school site. I'm familiar with that school because I've done some volunteer work there for cliff swallows, cleaning up after the mud and eggshells of the cliff swallows who nest under the eaves of those big tall buildings next to the slough. So I'm familiar with the campus, and I was very happy to see them get their own sports field. That's important for kids. Athletics is a good team sport and good activity rather than sitting around looking at a screen. So I was very happy to see that, and I would love to see them get a theater performing arts center too. And that's what the Pajaronian article was essentially promising their readers, that by voting on Measure M affirmatively, the Pajaro Valley High School kids would get a performing arts theater. But if you read Measure M's information, there is no mention of that at all. No mention of that at all. And what it does say is vaguely that it would be used for electrical wiring, fixing leaky roofs, things like that. And nowhere in the ballot measure does it talk about building a theater, a performing arts. And if it were going to be used for that, wouldn't you think that it would be front and center of what you want people to vote on? But it isn't. Not at all. What it says is, with funds that cannot be taken away by the state and spent elsewhere, shall Pajaro Valley Unified School District's measure to renovate classrooms, expand career and technical education programs, including robotics and coding, and replace outdated plumbing, leaking pipes, and aging electrical wiring be adopted, authorizing $315 million of bonds with levies less than $60 per 100,000 of assessed valuation, raising $18.3 million annually, while outstanding legal rates, annual audits, independent oversight, I'll bet, eligibility for state matching funds, and full public disclosure. Well, there we go again. I urge you to listen to Jeff Bosshard's program on Monday at 1 because he sent me a little bit of information. I was trying to research some of it this morning, and I apologize. I had to take a goat to the vet this morning, so I'm a little not quite myself. But according to Jeff, the state now pays for 50% of new construction projects. If the state's paying half, why isn't that discussed in Measure M? According to Jeff's information, the state also pays 3/5 of renovation costs. Now, what the Measure M proponents have put in here, basically, with the exception of robotics and coding, which is a pretty vague thing, they don't even say which schools would get it. They have 31 schools in the district, and they give a list of all the schools, but they don't say what they would do at each school. Why aren't they getting that money from the state? And if they are getting that money from the state, where is it going? That's the question we have to ask. And I have some experience with Pajaro Valley Unified School District. I haven't been to many of their board meetings, but I have been to some. And the one that stands out is one that I attended when the financial director at the time, a wonderful man, Joe Dominguez, was telling the Board of Trustees that with Proposition L, Measure L, another bond measure that the district got for $150 million. With that money, projects had been started at school playgrounds. None of them had been finished. He gave the example at one school there had been some loads of, I forget if it was dirt or base rock, something like that. It was dumped and nothing was ever done with it. So you have to wonder, where has the money gone from other bond measures, and where would this money go? Double what they've asked for before, $315 million. And we've heard from one of the trustees, Ms. Kim DeSerpa, who is running for county supervisor, 2nd District, that she has been on that board for, I think, 12 years, she said, and managed to help overseeing the school budget of $331 million. So here's a bond measure for $315 million, almost the total amount of 1 year of the budget. And where has the money gone? Where does the money go? The other part of Measure M that we'll get into is that it's way buried, but the bond money could be used to buy property and build housing for staff. Now think about that during the break. We're coming up on our news break here. Think about that, because other school districts are talking about it. Does that impose a security risk for the kids? And should schools be in the business of managing property rather than focusing on educating the kids? Why not pay the staff better? Think about that and come back at the end. Welcome back to Community Matters. This is your host, Becky Steinbruner. And again, I want to urge you to come take a look at Satellite Work and Digital Media Center. It's at 325 SoCal Avenue in Santa Cruz. It's a wonderful place. It's where our studio is. It's where community television is. There are small rooms you can rent by the hour, by the day, by the month, by the year, whatever you need. It's very clean, it's very quiet, and a very friendly and secure place. So do check out Satellite Work and Digital Media Center in Santa Cruz, 325 SoCal Avenue in Santa Cruz between Ocean Street and the river. And the first Friday is free. So if you just want to test it for free, you can. Now, I've been joined during the break here by my former co-host, Jeff Bosshard. I talked about his program, Freedom Forum, on Mondays. And he's going to be talking Monday about several bond measures, several local measures. So, Jeff, thank you for coming into the studio.
Well, it's good to be back, Becky. It's like old times in a way, but it's certainly wonderful to see you taking off and doing your own show without needing an engineer or someone else, as we tried some of that with other people. And you can fill a whole couple hours with all the things you know and the people that you've run up against or with and know who they are and what they are doing. So you're kind of a walking encyclopedia of community matters. But I am kind of thinking more about things that are happening around the country. But like you, a couple others that are on these various programs, wanting to interview as many of the candidates for local office as we possibly could. And you've done some for almost all the districts that are up, the 5th District and the 2nd District. You've had those candidates. And we've had some of the candidates for the city council offices. Very important. And we had one at the beginning of this week, last Monday, with Tina Kaufman Gomez running in the 6th
Trina
district.
Kaufman Gomez, yeah. She's
District
been
of
on Watsonville City Council before.
I think so, but she's been off for a bit now.
Yeah.
Too. But she needs to replace the guy that's in there now, so that's what's important.
Jimmy Dutra is also running, and he's certainly been in the news a lot with the court matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have several reasons for thinking she would be a better candidate there. And the candidates I like the best are the ones that are not coming off some professional track as a professional politician, but have been actually encouraged by the local community members, that they're so involved with what's going on that they should be on the council. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, they step forward. Mm-hmm. They're going to do that, hopefully. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, if people run and lose, that's not a bad thing either. I think every open seat should be contested. Even people running for re-election should be contested.
Absolutely.
And for that reason, I once ran against Fred Keeley.
Thank you.
We all know how that turned out.
Well, it was a good thing, because otherwise he would have been unopposed, and that's never a good thing, right?
Well, I'd like to think that's true. But, of course, then he went on to do even better things, moving up to the assembly, and then came back here to be a treasurer, and then now the mayor of Santa Cruz, who did some ribbon cutting around here recently. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. You've interviewed Fred Keeley, too, on the program, right?
Yes, and we also had him as a guest on our Santa Cruz Host Lions Club evening meeting, where he talked even more extensively about things. He really told us about the history of Santa Cruz vis-a-vis the university and its influence.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thought about inviting Mayor Keeley. I wanted to have someone talk about Measure Z that's on the Santa Cruz City ballot. That's the tax on sugary drinks. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, I think too many people in too high an office are thinking too much about how they control the local public. I think we should be free to have sugary drinks or not.
Yes.
And what is the difference between having a paper straw in a plastic wrapper a plastic straw in a paper wrapper. And it gets ridiculous after a while. Or telling us that we shouldn't eat red meat, maybe prohibiting that, or shouldn't eat white bread. Got to eat that other color bread. Hey, eat what you like, everybody.
People should be free to be making their own informed decisions.
That's why we have a Freedom Forum.
Yes. Thank you. Well, I am pleased that you have your own program and are doing so well. You are always welcome to join here, Community Matters. I'm really delighted you're here today.
Well, I'm glad you had an empty seat. It's still warm. I think maybe you had someone sitting here a while ago.
The sun came in. I lowered the blinds at the break. The clouds are really beautiful today, aren't they?
Yes. Sort of a scattered clouds is what they call it.
Yeah. I'm on the civil grand jury this year. And
no kidding. For how long? Is it 6 months, or how long does that last?
1 year.
Wonderful. People appreciate how important that grand jury is.
Mm-hmm.
Doing investigation of the runnings of the county facilities, different aspects of it, making recommendations for corrections, fixing, doing what they can. Mm-hmm. And is it the same grand jury that does indictments of people, the criminal grand jury, or is it?
No, this is the civil grand jury. Yeah. So the civil grand jury is charged with overseeing cities, counties, and special districts, and they are required to tour and inspect all of the jails in the county every year. They don't have to do an investigative report on them. Often they do, and they did last year, but it's not required, only that they inspect the facilities. And the grand jury is overseen by a judge. It is Judge Catherine Hansen this year. She's a rather new judge.
Yeah, I don't know the judges. In a way, gratefully, I should say, because I retired from being a lawyer over 2 years ago. And really, there's so many judges there I don't even know.
Yeah.
We'll put the other, there's very few that I do.
Yeah. Well, I have always been very grateful and impressed by the reports that come out from the Santa Cruz County Civil Grand Jury. I think they have been getting better and better. Last year's was, I thought, very good. They investigated the county's road conditions and funding. There was an excellent one about why the CZU fire area victims have not been able to rebuild at a very quick rate. And that was a very interesting report. So I'm sworn to confidentiality, as all jurors are. So I cannot tell you the topics that are being investigated, but I will tell you that there promises to be some very good reports come out in the spring.
Well, you and I, in our various programs, have heard the word that the county budget for repairing roads has run out. There's no funds to fill up the potholes.
Yes, that's what they say, even though the county has promised the voters many times with half-cent sales taxes and different things that it will go to fund road repair, and it's just not happening. What the county is claiming is that because FEMA has not reimbursed very handily for the expenditures for COVID, for the fire, for the floods, that they've run out of money, and in fact had to borrow an unprecedented $95 million to keep the county going. But in September, I think it was September 10th board meeting, they got an updated budget report, and FEMA had paid about half of what the county felt was due. But they still are not fixing the roads.
Right. Well, we had the disasters early on the time that you and I started that first program here.
Yes.
We talked about the flooding, the levee in South County. Then, of course, there were the fires. I mean, how much can one county take? Then the devastating blows that the winds and tides blew against our coastlines.
Capitola.
Battered on all sides.
Yeah.
And here we stand.
Yeah. Well, we are a strong community, and these things have happened in the past. If you read the archives of things, there have been very large hotels along the coast and they burned. They burned, but things were built back. So I have no doubt that we will rebuild, we'll make do. And I heard that one of the restaurants out on the end of the Santa Cruz Wharf, the Dolphin, was demolished yesterday because of damage underneath, and they just tore it all down.
It's nice to know that the Capitola Wharf, the historic wharf, has been rebuilt.
Yeah. Bigger
even, and holds a lot of number of people. I haven't been out there yet. I have been up and down the beaches assessing the damage that nature has done. Man is partly straightened out. Because beach walking is one of my favorite activities. Good for the legs, good for your health.
Indeed. And it's I love to watch the birds and the sea life.
About the dogs and the people. Everything is fun to watch.
Well, you came at a very opportune time, Jeff. I mean, you're always welcome here, and it's always good to see you. But before the break, I was talking about Measure M, the Pajaro Valley School bond measure for $315 million. And I read your information you sent out in an email this morning about your program Monday. And you mentioned in that the state now pays for 50% of the cost of new construction and 3/5 of the cost of renovation. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I probably will after I've studied it more.
Okay. Okay, I got it.
Just touching the edge there. I wanted to send that out to you and my co-host for the program next Monday. So I'll be thinking about it. And you did a job of filling in about Measure Q.
Yes.
I learned what I needed to learn through you about that.
Yeah. And I hope you were able to hear last week's interview with Scotts Valley Fire Chief Mark Carrera.
I didn't know. He's the same guy we had here with the bond measure failed to get the building money needed for a new firehouse.
You're kind of moving in and out. Do you want to move the mic up a little closer?
Well, I'll stand closer to the mic.
Okay, all right.
I keep admonishing other people about this.
And you're welcome to come over to this other mic if that's more convenient, whenever you want to do.
Well, some of my favorite hosts have said that's their favorite mic, the boom mic, pedestal mic. And I don't really like to wear the headset that you're wearing as the post that you hold. But then it gets a little problematic when people hear my breathing or the rustling of papers. So there's something to be said about each kind of equipment that we have here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice studio, isn't it?
Love the studio.
Yeah.
The other one's good. It was just a little bit more crowded.
Yeah.
Glad to have it in any case.
Indeed. Indeed.
But what you said about this facility at the opening of this hour of your show is something I totally agree with, and we do have them as an advertiser, which we support as part of our package of advertising. Yes, it's been wonderful here. It's usually air-conditioned. It's accessible and is secure. You have to have the right tools to get in. So we feel very good about it. It's been very good for our guests on all the programs.
It's worked out well. Last week, 2 weeks ago, when Central Fire Chief Jason Nee and Assistant Fire Chief Cefaloni were both here in the studio. It was very spacious, and in our old studio, it would have been pretty cramped.
All right. It's okay. It's cool.
It is. It's wonderful. I like it when people come to the studio, but we're very grateful to Parish, where our former studio was, and also to Satellite Workspace and Digital Media Center for our space here.
Yeah, we appreciated the use of that facility. It was an old room that I probably didn't do much with, maybe stored things in. And one advantage of it to me is like yourself, living toward the south end of the county, it was quicker to get home from 41st Avenue than it is from downtown Santa Cruz. It could take me an hour from here.
Yes.
It took me an hour yesterday when I left the opening we had just to get up to the other end of the county or do the meeting.
Yeah, the construction on top of the traffic volume makes it difficult. Well, let's go back to Measure M here.
Yeah. I'll listen for a bit longer here, and then I'm going to kind of excuse myself so I can prepare myself to be the perfect Jim 2 kind of program host that he is, which is, I mean, he does a whole hour by himself sometimes. I'm just sitting there kind of listening, and he sometimes let me talk. So now it's the other end of the spectrum. I'm going to do all the talking. I have to have something to say.
I'm sure you'll be fine. Well, you scoot out whenever you want to, and thank you, Jeff Bosshard, for joining me here.
Well, go ahead with Measure M. If I get all tuned up here, I'll knock my way back in. Be happy to.
All right.
Good
Excellent.
to see you, too. And
likewise. Thank you.
I can say something that's sort of private is thank you for what you did last night to have a dinner ready for all the people who attended the meeting of your Lions Club in Aptos,
yes.
The Cabrillo hosts. Wonderful meeting.
That was a wonderful meeting. The Lions Club, Cabrillo Host Lions Club, hosted a combined club meeting. So we had people from Santa Cruz Lions, Capitola Lions, Freedom Lions, and then the district officers, and they all spoke, and it was really quite a nice evening. I enjoyed it much, and I had the honor, with a name like Steinbruner, you have to be the one to sign up for the Oktoberfest dinner. Our club has a great cook. His name is J.D. Dang. He is a wonderful cook, and for the last 2 years, he's been our cook for our meals that we serve at our meetings. But now he's president, so we had to get him out of the kitchen.
Oh.
And we did that by having a member of the club sign up to do the cooking at different months, and I signed up for Oktoberfest. So
I don't think he even calls himself a cook. He calls himself a barbecuer. It's excellent to make him try to. And other things,
He is. He's very good. I've called him a chef, and he said, no, I'm a cook.
Spread the wealth. We'll all learn to do it eventually.
Exactly. Well, going back to Measure M, here's the piece that I worry about, and maybe others can think about this, but in the fine print of Measure M, the bond measure could be used to buy property and build housing for staff. And it says that it would attract quality and retain quality staff. Well, I have a concern about if the property, if the housing is on the grounds of the school. To me, that brings a certain amount of security risk to the students, because it's not just the staff that's going to be there. It would be their family, their friends. You know, how would that be managed? Do you have any thought on that, Jeff?
Well, first of all, in all the programs we've done together and separately, we note that all the various agencies, including schools, have a problem getting their employees to be able to live close enough that their commute doesn't take 2 hours because it's an expensive place to live. But if the school can set up a system of housing that's separated somewhat from the schools so they aren't actually on the same grounds necessarily, I think it helps a lot. I mean, it's just like you're living next door then.
Uh-huh.
But it's a question of what they're doing. When we talked to the Metro, we learned that they were trying to get housing. Right. And, of course, the firemen want to have their guys right there because they don't have to commute too far. And that's the way it goes. I don't know how you can do one thing without having some of the problems that go with it, but those problems can be ironed out, I think.
To me, using school bond money to build housing is not the focus of a school. If the issue is problems with staff being able to live nearby, then it seems an alternative would be to issue higher salary so they could afford to find a place. And Santa Cruz County is about to see a boom of housing. Certainly downtown Santa Cruz, we're seeing it, and in the unincorporated area, Live Oak, SoCal, we're seeing it.
What if the school district bought, say, a condominium that has a lot of different rooms and such, not necessarily at or near the school grounds, but close enough that the drive or the bicycle or even walking can get you there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a problem with that. Again, if we don't have teachers, what kind of schools do we have?
That's true. But again, why not just pay them more? Pay them commensurate.
Well, no matter how much they get paid, if they have to drive a long way, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And there's never enough money for school teachers.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of teachers, and they sometimes have to buy all the supplies that they get for the kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, pay them more, fine.
Pay them more, or maybe issue vouchers to those who qualify. And the part that I'm worried about is that is not only the security risk if the housing is on school grounds, but also it puts the school in the business of property management more than they already are with their facilities, and it seems like they're struggling with that. So I think it needs to be investigated more. And I'm hoping to have Dr. Heather Contreras on the program soon. You look like you have to go out and get ready, Jeff. Thank you very much for joining me here, and I'll look forward to seeing you come back in. Take care. So this is Community Matters with your host, Becky Steinbruner, and you are welcome to call and join the discussion. Jeff Bosshard, my former co-host, and I have been talking about Measure M and some other matters too, sort of saying hello again to each other. And I'd like to ask you to join in. Here's the number, 831-265-5050, 265-5050. And call in and join the conversation. What do you think about a school district going into property management arena? Is it a good way to address the problem that teachers are not able to find affordable housing near their jobs and so have to move away? Should we just, instead of building new buildings, should we pay them more and not go into the business of property management? Should we give them vouchers if they qualify? I don't know. It's an interesting thought. The piece, again, that I want to talk about this is Measure M, is that it's very vague as to how the money would be spent. Electrical wiring, leaky pipes, outdated plumbing, robotics and coding educational programs, but nothing specific. And in the fine print, let me see if I can find it here, it talks about, way back, that the district can change its mind as to how they use the money in the future if conditions change. So they could decide not to fix things. They could decide not to offer robotics or anything like that because they've changed their minds. That's in the voter pamphlet. So read that voter pamphlet carefully, and you will find it. I'm looking here. It's under, in the voter pamphlet on page 33, the next to the last paragraph, it said, the scope and nature of any of the specific projects described above, which aren't described, they're very vague, may be altered by the district as required by unforeseen conditions that may arise during the course of design and accomplishment of the projects in the event that a modernization or renovation project is more economical for the district to be undertaken as new construction, which, according to Jeff's research, the state would pay 50% for. This bond measure authorizes land acquisition, relocation, and construction and or reconstruction and all costs related thereto for said reason or alternatively based on other considerations deemed in the best interest of the district by the Board of Trustees. So that leads us to the next piece of this is the Board of Trustees. Who is your school board trustee? You can look on the website for Pajaro Valley Unified School District. There are, I think, 6 trustees. And I tried to, I did invite Trustee Georgia Acosta. She's the president of the Board of Trustees this year, but she works on Fridays at the University of California. So she could not, but she phoned me this morning. I really was grateful for that and recommended that regarding Measure M, that I contact Dr. Heather Contreras, the superintendent for Pajaro Valley School District. So I have that. Hopefully we can look forward to that next week. Well, on the ballot, there's also Proposition 2, which has to do with school measures. And I neglected to bring the state proposition ballot information in from the car. As I said, talking with Jeff, I had a veterinarian emergency this morning with a goat, and it did not go well. So I'm kind of not myself today. So apologies, but thank you for listening to Community Matters. Proposition 2 has to do with educational expenses, funding thereof. And there is, I was trying to do a little bit of research about it before I came here to the studio and found an article on a website called EdSource talking about school finances and how property-poor districts demand fairer funding for school facilities. This was an article written last February of this year talking about an impending lawsuit if Governor Newsom did not put on the ballot something that would make it more equitable, more balanced for funding schools in poorer areas. Schools get most of the money for their operations from state income taxes. Some do come from property taxes, and so it's left for school districts to try to make up the rest with bonds. There was one income revenue source that was not mentioned in this, and that's the lottery, the state lottery money. I remember when that all began, and we were told as voters, if we legalized lottery, all the money would go to schools, and the schools would have all the money they needed. Well, it hasn't panned out, has it? But where does the money go? What does the school do with the money they get? So there's something you can do, and that I have learned to do when I have questions like this. You can certainly go to, for example, school board meetings, and you will not, you can ask that question, but they won't answer you. They have the option of doing three things if someone comes to them with a question not relevant to an agenda item for their consideration that has been posted, because the Ralph M. Brown Act forbids them from making decisions or having any meaningful discussion of anything that is not posted on their agenda. And that's to protect the people who may not be there, who didn't know they were going to talk about that or make a decision, and it is to protect transparency, and that's a good thing. So, but you can still go and ask your question. And the body, whether it's a school board, a water board, fire board, board of supervisors, they can ask you for clarification. They can refer you to a staff member that will help you get the answer to your question, or they can have it put on the agenda at an upcoming meeting. Now, it depends on which body you are going before to talk. Some are much more responsive than others, but they have that option. And if you don't get any response at all, if you feel like they haven't even heard you, then one way you can get the answer to your question is two ways. try to find the staff member that you think knows the answer and call them up, make an appointment, ask them the question in advance so that they're prepared with the information and they don't have to look it up and get back to you and maybe not do that. The other thing you can do is file something called a Public Records Act request. And that is, by law, they must give you whatever materials you ask for. If it's public information, they have the right to redact or blank out personal information of different people, whatever. There are some cases when they cannot, if it has to do with personnel files or something, medical files, things like that. But otherwise, they have to give you what you ask for. They can take their own sweet time to do it, but they must reply or acknowledge your request within 10 days and give you an estimate of when they think they might be able to give you the responsive materials, the materials you're asking for. So what you do if you want to file a Public Records Act request, that's the term used for local requests. If it's a federal, it tends to be called a Freedom of Information Act, a FOIA. But it's the same thing. You want to ask exactly if you know a document that you want, you ask for that document specifically and the time, the date, range of date that you think it is. And always use the term any and all, pertaining to anything related to it, for example. And you want to, if you're not exactly sure or you don't want to really tip your hand exactly what it is you're looking for, which may set off some flags with some organizations, you can just describe. For example, I have filed them with the Santa Cruz County Fairgrounds, the 14th District Agricultural Association, DAA, and I have filed them for any and all correspondence, notes, invoices, payments, things like that, if you're trying to figure out who paid for what and when and how and why. And between the dates of January 1, 2020 to January 1, 2022, you can cast the net as broadly as you want or as narrowly as you want. But be prepared if you make a big, like I've known people that ask for all the invoices for the last 20 years. Well, that's a pretty broad net, and it's always better to start smaller and work out if you find something or you don't find what you're looking for. And it also excuse me. It also allows them not to use the voluminous delay that is often used, and you may not ever get it because they count on you forgetting about it. So you can file Public Records Act requests. So you could file a Public Records Act request with Pajaro Valley Unified School District for expenditures of Measure L, which was the 2016 bond measure for $150 million that was passed, that was to do the same things that Measure M is claiming that need to be done. You could file a Public Records Act request with Pajaro Valley School District and ask for any and all expenditures invoices, bids, change orders, things like that, for playgrounds, playground improvements, renovations. You kind of want to use different words because they'll play on that too. And for school grounds made with Measure L bond money. And you could put it from January 1, 2016, or whenever the bond measure was passed, to present, and find out where did that money go. And that way you can ask the school district for specific information that then you can review. Now, sometimes they'll say, we don't have anything. Sometimes they'll say, and they say that there are no responsive records. Sometimes they'll say, they'll quote this legal case, Times Mirror, that the benefit of withholding the information from you outweighs the benefit of you having it. I've had that happen a couple times, amazingly. And sometimes they will just flood you with so much information that you will be overwhelmed. And I've had that happen too, mostly with state organizations. When I was trying to find the studies that verify the state's determination that the Mid-County groundwater basin is in critical overdraft, I asked for the studies to support that, and because I had been told there were none. And what I got was just so much superfluous information, how much water it takes to grow soybeans. That was in there. Things like that. It was a voluminous amount of information. And I wrote back and said, thank you for this, but it does not address anything to do with the Mid-County groundwater basin overdraft. And after that, I got an invitation to talk with a couple of staff members on the State Water Board, and they essentially took me to task for not writing my Public Records Act request properly. I had not included other names of the Mid-County Groundwater Agency before it became that. And at that time, I was kind of new to doing this sort of thing, and I was so intimidated, I just didn't ask many questions. And I've since filed a renewed request, and they have not responded. They keep pushing the date back. They keep saying, oh, this voluminous information, when I've been told by a staffer on the QT that there is nothing. But that's what you can try and do, to try to get answers to your questions. So let's go back to some of these other bond, or some of these other measures on the ballot. What are you thinking about Proposition 4? That's kind of a state version of our Measure Q, and yet it would be statewide. Again, do we have the ability to go into further debt? That's what I think you have to ask. There are other measures on the local ballot. There are many of them, in fact. One of which is Measure T. If you live in the Zianti Fire District, you may want to spend some time taking a look at Measure T. It's an independent district. It would replace the current parcel tax of $75. The new residential parcel tax breaks down to about $24 a month or 80 cents a day. So It doesn't really say how much that total amount would be. Oh, wait, here it does. Measure T will help maintain reliable daytime response and replace emergency vehicles. A new special annual tax of $50 for vacant parcels less than 5 acres, $100 for vacant parcels 5 acres or more, and $290 for residential, commercial, and other improved parcels. The annual increase, with an annual increase based on up to 2% annual cost of living increase. Ziante Fire District is predominantly a volunteer fire district. They have a chief that's there, Chief Jeff Maxwell, who, by the way, has really done a yeoman's job of leading the Fire Chiefs Association opposition to Measure Q, and has been involved in the attempted negotiations with the Land Trust to work out this issue of would Measure Q really reliably fund fire and projects to reduce fire risk? And the answer was no. So he has really impressed upon the other fire chiefs that this is the time to make the stand. Chief Jeff Maxwell up in the Ziante Fire District. So what's happening up there? There was opposition also filed against Measure T, and I will try to get that person in, Ms. Gomez, next week. Is that Felton Fire, their neighbor, Felton Fire District, who's been a very active volunteer fire department, has sort of imploded politically. Their volunteers, most of them do not live in the Felton area. And they have taken the attitude that if they're not going to get paid very well, they're not going to respond in the off hours. So they, according to what I've heard, they turn their pagers off at 6 o'clock at night, and they may not answer calls on the weekend. So who's going to Felton area when someone there calls 911? It's Ziante Fire. Ziante Fire is responding to Felton Fire's emergencies. And you really have to ask yourself, what's happening? Maybe it's time for the people of Felton to wake up and start attending those Felton Fire Board meetings. I've heard they're pretty caustic, if you will, because there is a small group of volunteers who don't really want to be volunteers. They want to be paid professionals, and certainly they are well trained and they are professionals, but there's a lot of politics going on in Felton Fire. So if you're listening and you're part of the San Lorenzo Valley area, you might want to pay attention to what's happening in Felton Fire. And you might want to, if you're in the Ziante Fire area, think about this tax increase. Their volunteers show up, and they live locally, and we'll have to get the opposition in here next week to talk about why she is opposed to this. Measure T on the ballot for Ziante Fire Protection would replace aging engines and maintain daytime staffing. I did ask Chief Maxwell if he would be my guest here. He said he prefers to go talk locally with residential groups up there in the Ziante Fire area, and I respect that. All right. Let's see. We've got about 10 minutes here. Please call me, and we can talk about anything that I've discussed here today or anything else on your mind regarding local issues. This is Community Matters, and I'm your host, Becky Steinbruner, for the next 10 minutes. And then Jeff Bosshard, my former host, is going to step in and take over for The Danger Zone, usually hosted by Jim, too. But you're in for a treat today to have Jeff Bosshard. So I attend a different community meetings when I can. I especially try to attend the County Board of Supervisor meetings. And one issue that happened August 13th at a Board of Supervisor meeting was outgoing Supervisor Bruce McPherson brought an issue to the board asking them to approve it to create an overlay zone or combining district to be applied to property in all zoning designations within a specified proximity to existing electricity transmission centers that allow energy storage systems to be developed with a discretionary planning commission conditional use. The permit where determined to be of significant benefit to health, safety, and welfare as quasi-community facilities, and take related actions. It was brought to the board. Usually issues on the agenda are put on by two supervisors. This one was put on by District 5 Supervisor McPherson, who is not going to run for election again, and District 4 Supervisor Hernandez, who was just recently voted in. So this was interesting because it seemed like it was coming from left field to many of the staffers from the planning department, from different places. But what it is they would build battery storage stations, and these are parcels. There are 4 of them that were proposed that would create battery storage stations, much like what is down in Moss Landing. But they would be in 4 different places in the county. The matter was, it was a very interesting thing. The matter was discussed. Staff from environmental planning came up and said, well, this is the first we've heard of this, and we have to put together more of a staff report for this. And one of the other supervisors said, well, what about environmental issues? Some of these, for example, in the area where I live, the location would be next to Aptos High, which has a pretty high flammability index with all the eucalyptus and things. It would be near the high school. Don't you think we'd ought to take a look at what it would mean for fire risk? And another supervisor said yes, and some of it would be on agricultural land. We have an ordinance in our county that we're not supposed to take agricultural land out of production. That looks like some of these 13-plus acre parcels are agricultural land. And Bruce McPherson, Supervisor McPherson, was very adamant that it had to be passed. Now, he sits on the board and is, in fact, one of the main driving forces. He and his analyst, Jenny Johnson, they got the it's now called Central Coast Community Power. They got that up and running in this county as sort of an alternative to PG&E. And it is now very large. It goes all the way down to Southern California. It's not a local power community-based at all. I mean, it's a very large community if you want to include Santa Barbara as part of our coastal community. But it was very interesting to watch that he was adamant, Supervisor McPherson was adamant that it needed to be passed. And I believe it was a conflict of interest that he has by sitting on the board of, it's coined as 3CE, Central Coast Community Energy. And I called him on it, and no one said anything, but he implored that the staff come back with a report in October. I didn't see it. It could have been buried in the consent agenda, which is another trick they often do. But one of the parcels is on Green Valley Road. As I said earlier, another parcel is right on Freedom Boulevard across from Aptos High. And then there was one in Santa Cruz and one in Scotts Valley. And the thing about this is that these batteries have a penchant for catching on fire, as we've seen down in Moss Landing. They catch fire. And so keep your eyes open for that, because it is an important issue. And I have a feeling that Supervisor McPherson, in his lame duck time, is going to force this issue, and we will see these centers on our farmland and potentially in neighborhoods and near schools. So feel free to call in and join me here in the last 5 minutes of Community Matters. This is Becky Steinbruner, and the number you can call is 265-5050. Another thing that I have attended is Santa Cruz County Fair Board meetings. They recently held one Tuesday. And there's been a problem out there in that CalTrans, Granite Construction, has been dumping a lot of the soils that we see from the freeway projects onto the parking lot at the fairgrounds. That was supposed to be with the fairgrounds manager's authorization, but he claims that they've done much more than what he had agreed to, even though the copy of the agreement that he gave to the board at all. And there was also a question about the contamination of the soil being near the freeways. And there's a question why it was put on the creek that leads to College Lake. College Lake is the place of a very large water reclamation project now with Pajaro Valley Water Management Agency. And that erosion from that dumped dirt there at the fairgrounds leads right there. So there's a lot going on there, and I filed a Public Records Act request with CalTrans to get a copy of the agreement regarding this. And the agreement that CalTrans had on file was completely different than the one that CEO Fraser from Santa Cruz County Fairgrounds gave to the board. The one CalTrans had on file gave a specified amount, 27,000 cubic yards, and the soil was from the median. The contract CEO Fraser gave to the board specified no soil amount and said it was from the Capitola overcrossing. Soil from an overcrossing up high is much different than that in a median. So there's what a Public Records Act request can reveal to you, and I urge you to try filing one. We're near our time, and I want to thank you all for listening here to Community Matters. Next Friday, we hope to have Dr. Heather Contreras from the Pajaro Valley Unified School District and Miss Jennifer Gomez, who has filed opposition to Measure T in Ziante Fire. This is Community Matters, and I'm Becky Steinbruner, and I look forward to hosting another program with you and hopefully having you call in next week. So look forward now to Jeff Bosshard coming in to stand in for Jim 2 on the Danger Zone, and make sure you listen to Jeff's program next Monday, the Freedom Forum at 1 o'clock. Thanks so much. Take care.